You ever live with someone so long you forget what silence sounds like? Then one day you realize the silence wasn't real. It was just them choosing not to hear you. 3 years into our marriage, my husband went deaf and blind, but only to me. I'd call him 7 times to hang the laundry, no response. He could step over trash like it didn't exist. Our daughter would cry beside him while he scrolled endlessly, eyes glued to a screen. But the moment I turned my key in the door, "Oh, you're back. Here, take the kid." Suddenly, he could hear just fine. Turns out, he wasn't deaf. He just didn't care to listen. It started with something small. I was cramping so bad that day I couldn't stand. Lying in bed, I remembered I'd left the laundry sitting in the machine. I called out to him softly at first, "Babe, can you hang the clothes?" No answer. I called again, louder. Still nothing. I shouted. 5, 6, maybe 7 times. Not a sound. Then I heard it laughter from the living room. His laugh, the one he saves for dumb game clips and short videos. So he was there. He just chose not to respond. That was the first time I felt it, that heat crawling up my spine. I stormed out, stood right in front of him, shadow casting over his face. "Jason!" He looked up finally. "What, I called you 5 times. Really, I didn't hear you. This apartment is 900 square feet. I screamed loud enough the neighbors probably heard. What's your excuse?" He shrugged. "Maybe your voice was too soft." I stood there staring at the man who used to make me coffee, who used to listen when I sighed, who used to say I had the gentlest tone. Now he couldn't even hear me when I screamed. It didn't stop there. Every day it got worse. I'd ask if he wanted strawberries after dinner. No response. He'd be 2 feet away and nothing. I'd ask him to pick up vinegar from the store. He'd come back empty-handed, claiming I never said a word. Trash bags left untouched at the door. Keys misplaced, laundry forgotten. His excuses. Always the same, I didn't hear. "You never told me. I must have been distracted." He wasn't distracted. He was choosing to ignore me. That's when it hit me. I was living with someone who only wanted a roommate, a maid, a nanny. Not a partner, not a woman, definitely not a wife. And just like that, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not all at once. Just a quiet shift, like a radio tuning to a new frequency. One he couldn't hear, but I could. Loud and clear. The shift was so small at first, even Jason didn't notice. The laundry didn't fold itself. Dishes started stacking up. Dinner went from warm-plated meals to sandwiches and leftovers. I didn't explain. I didn't announce anything. I just stopped. The first few days, Jason was too distracted to care. Still glued to his phone, still disappearing into his games. But then he ran out of clean socks. Then coffee filters. Then his favorite hoodie smelled like baby spit-up because Sophie had been clinging to him during one of her tantrums, and he didn't know how to handle it. He came stomping into the kitchen. "Madison, why didn't you wash my work shirt?" I looked up from my laptop and blinked like I'd just noticed him. "Sorry, did you say something?" His eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb. You always handle the laundry." "Do I?" I smiled. "I guess I didn't hear you ask." That was the moment he realized something had changed. I started living like he wasn't there. Not out of anger, just peace. I made breakfast for Sophie and me. I packed her school bag. I played with her, colored with her, sang silly songs. Jason was free to join, but he didn't. He just watched confused, like someone had moved all the furniture in his mental house and he couldn't find the couch. One night, he sat across from me in silence while I helped Sophie with her homework. Then out of nowhere, he asked, Are you mad at me? I didn't even look up. Why would I be? You've been acting different. No, I said gently. You just finally noticed. He didn't have a response for that. Later that week, I got home late after picking up groceries. I walked in to see Jason sitting on the couch, staring at the TV but not watching. He looked tired. The laundry basket still sat by the door right where I left it that morning. Sophie was half asleep on the floor, crayons everywhere. I tucked her in, made myself tea, and sat across from him. He was waiting for something, an apology, a restart, maybe the old Madison. But I was gone. I'd changed quietly like the tide pulling away from the shore. He said, "You've given up, haven't you?" I looked at him for a long time. "No, Jason," I said. I just finally realized I was the only one trying. Then I stood up, kissed Sophie's forehead, and let the silence stretch between us like a wall he built, and I stopped climbing. The wall between us grew thicker with every day of silence. Jason wasn't used to discomfort. He was used to me smoothing the edges, softening the blows, filling in the gaps. Now that I wasn't doing that, he walked around like he didn't recognize his own life. He started making noises, slamming drawers, sighing loudly, tossing laundry baskets around like a martyr. I let him. If he wanted to play victim, I wasn't auditioning for the role of caretaker anymore. One morning, he accidentally left the trash bag by the front door. I stepped over it. So did Sophie. 2 days later, the smell hit him before it hit me. He finally took it out. That night, he stood in the hallway watching me brush Sophie's hair. "Why are you doing this, doing what I asked without looking up, treating me like I'm invisible?" I met his eyes in the mirror. "You taught me how." He had no comeback for that. He turned and left the room. 2 days later, I got a phone call from his mother. Elaine Carter, queen of suburbia, whose only real hobby was micromanaging everyone else's life. She sounded sharp, impatient, ready for war. "I hear things are falling apart over there." From who I asked, though, I already knew. "Jason says you've stopped taking care of the home, that you're acting strange." I let out a quiet laugh. I didn't realize being exhausted was a crime. "Well, he works too, Madison. He's under stress." And I snapped. I raised Sophie, manage the house, hold a job, and still get treated like wallpaper. Forgive me for wanting to breathe. Elaine clicked her tongue. Marriage is about sacrifice. I felt my spine go cold. I sacrificed for 3 years, now it's his turn. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a long moment, hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the kind of anger that comes when someone finally names the thing you've been denying. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cold. I was just done. And they were only now starting to notice. Elaine showed up 2 days later, unannounced, uninvited, and already frowning. She stepped into our living room like it was still hers, dropped her designer bag on the couch, and scanned the space for signs of chaos. When she didn't find any, she made some up. Dust on the blinds, she muttered. Carpet could use a deep clean. "What happened to your standards, Madison?" I smiled politely. I stopped confusing perfection with peace. She didn't like that. Jason slunk in behind her eyes on the floor, saying nothing. He didn't even back her up when she started on me, accusing me of neglect, of being distant, of not taking care of her son. I sat calmly across from them, legs crossed, cup of tea in hand. I waited until we finished her tirade, then said, "You raised him. You're not mad at me. You're mad at your own work." Jason looked like he'd been slapped. Elaine turned red, furious, sputtering something about respect and tradition, but I didn't give her the satisfaction. I stood up. Dinner's in the fridge labeled. If you two are hungry, help yourselves. I'm going to bed, and I walked away. For the first time in my life, I let the fire burn behind me without rushing to put it out. That night, I lay in bed with Sophie tucked against my side, her breathing steady. I stared at the ceiling, listening to muffled voices in the kitchen. Elaine's sharp tone, Jason's softer, unsure replies. They were trying to fix a version of me that no longer existed. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake, and nothing they said could send me back to sleep. The next morning, Elaine was already in the kitchen, micromanaging the coffee maker like it owed her rent. She didn't say good morning. She didn't ask about Sophie. She just launched in. I don't know what kind of rebellion this is, Madison, but you're hurting your marriage. I buttered toast slowly. This isn't rebellion. This is recovery. Jason wandered in a few minutes later, shirt wrinkled, still half asleep. He looked between us like a referee too afraid to blow the whistle. Elaine kept going. Do you even realize how many women would kill to have what you have? I set the knife down. What I have? Elaine is a grown man who ignores his daughter, lets laundry rot in the hamper, and doesn't hear me unless I'm silent. What exactly are women supposed to be jealous of? Jason flinched. Elaine's mouth opened, then closed. Sophie wandered in hair messy, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. She climbed into my lap without a word. I kissed her head. Elaine folded her arms. You're teaching her to disrespect her father. I smiled gently. No, I'm teaching her what self-respect looks like. By the end of the day, Elaine had packed her things and called a rideshare without another word. Jason didn't stop her. He didn't even ask me to. That night, he stood in the hallway watching me fold Sophie's pajamas. I didn't realize things got this bad, he said quietly. They didn't, I replied. They were always this bad. You just weren't looking. He hesitated. I don't want to lose this family. I looked up. Then you should have shown up for it. He didn't speak after that. He just stood there staring at the life he'd neglected, finally realizing he might never be able to step back in. And me, I tucked Sophie into bed, turned out the lights, and slept soundly. Because when a man only listens once he's losing everything, you start to realize you were never heard to begin with. Jason didn't leave right away. He lingered. Maybe he thought I'd cool off. Maybe he was hoping for some big breakdown, the moment where I'd cry and say I didn't mean any of it, that I wanted us to go back to how things were. But I didn't want that. I didn't want back. I wanted out. He started trying harder, making coffee, picking Sophie up from school. Wiping the kitchen counter like that could erase 3 years of neglect. He even asked how my day was, like the words tasted strange in his mouth. I didn't push him away, but I didn't praise him either. You don't get applause for doing the bare minimum, not when someone else has been carrying everything. One night, he asked, So, is there someone else? I looked up from folding laundry, genuinely confused. What, you're different? Like you're already gone. I smiled softly. I am. That silence afterward. It was the sound of a man realizing he'd already lost and he didn't even notice when it happened. A week later, I found divorce papers on the kitchen counter. He didn't hand them to me, just left them there between the unopened mail and a half-empty coffee cup. It was the first grown-up thing he'd done in months. I signed them the next morning before making breakfast. Sophie sat at the table coloring while I slid the papers back into the envelope. She looked up and asked, Are we moving? Maybe I said. Would you like that? She nodded. somewhere with big windows and pancakes every morning. That night I started browsing apartments, and for the first time I wasn't planning how to escape. I was planning where we'd thrive. We moved out on a Wednesday. Not for dramatic effect, just because the lease started on a Wednesday, and I liked the idea of beginning midweek quietly without fanfare. The apartment was small, but the light poured in from every window. The kitchen tiles were chipped in places, and the heater rattled at night, but it was ours. I let Sophie pick the color of her bed sheets, mint green with little stars, and she spent hours arranging her stuffed animals along the windowsill. Jason didn't show up to say goodbye. He texted once, "Let me know when you're settled. I'd like to see Sophie sometime." I replied, "When you're ready to be consistent, not convenient." He didn't answer. The first night in the new place, Sophie and I sat on the floor with paper plates and takeout noodles. No chairs yet, no TV, just music from my phone and the warm sound of her laughter echoing off the bare walls. "This is fun," she said, slurping noodles. "Yeah," I smiled. "It really is." After she fell asleep that night, curled up beside me on a mattress with no frame, I sat by the window and watched the city flicker. No part of me missed the old life. The silence, the pretending, the hollow routines. It had all been noise covering up the truth I'd been surviving. Now we were living. The next day, I found a part-time position at a community center nearby. Flexible hours, decent pay, a team that actually said thank you. Linda offered to watch Sophie in the afternoons like she'd been waiting for this moment. We started a rhythm: Monday grocery runs, Tuesday library visits, Saturday mornings at the park. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't picture perfect, but it was safe, and it was ours. Sometimes I'd get updates about Jason from mutual friends, from Elaine, from vague Facebook posts. Apparently, Olivia Brooks had left him a month after our papers were signed. Took her designer heels and her dreams of a clean-cut, high-income husband with her. Jason lost his job shortly after. Elaine tried to guilt me back into his life. "He's not doing well," she said. "He misses his family." I told her so did I, and no one came looking then. She never called again. By month 3, the new apartment felt like home. There was chipped paint on the hallway wall from when Sophie ran through with her toy stroller. The bookshelf leaned slightly because I'd built it myself with the wrong screws. Our fridge was covered in crayon drawings, daycare reminders, and a magnet that read, "You can do hard things." And I had. I got up every morning before sunrise, packed Sophie's snack-made coffee, and walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. The days were long, the paycheck modest, but for the first time in years, I knew exactly where the money was going, and none of it was wasted trying to hold up a man who wouldn't carry himself. One Saturday afternoon, Linda stopped by with lemon bars and that knowing smile of hers. She looked around the apartment, then at me. "You're glowing," she said. I laughed. "I'm exhausted." "No," she said, tapping her chest. "You're free. It's different." She was right. It wasn't that I had more time or more help. I just had more room in my mind, in my day, in my chest. More room to breathe, to think, to simply exist without constantly being erased. Sophie thrived too. Her tantrums faded, her sleep deepened. She asked fewer questions about when Daddy's coming and more questions like, "Can I bring cookies for my teacher, or do we have tape for my rocket ship?" One night after her bath, she looked up at me with shampoo still clinging to her curls and said, "You smile a lot now." I kissed her forehead. "That's because I'm happy." She blinked. "You weren't before I paused. Not like this." Later that evening, I sat at the kitchen table scrolling job boards. I didn't need to, but something inside me was ready for more, not just surviving bills and bedtime, but building something, a future, a career, a dream of my own. I wasn't sure what came next, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I never planned to go back to school, but one night while Sophie slept and the apartment was still, I opened my laptop and searched for online programs. Something small, something doable, something mine. I found a night course in digital marketing, affordable, flexible, and just scary enough to make me feel alive again. I signed up without telling anyone. It felt like slipping a letter to the future version of me that said, "Hang in there. We're building something." The first class felt awkward. I hadn't written a paper in over a decade. But the feeling of doing something just for me, no diapers, no dishes, no demands, was addictive. Linda cheered me on. Sophie drew me good luck notes before every test. Our fridge soon held spelling quizzes and marketing strategy diagrams side by side. I started dreaming bigger, not just of surviving on my paycheck, but of thriving, running something, leading something, owning something. Jason texted once asking if he could visit Sophie sometime soon. I didn't say no, but I asked, "Have you been to therapy yet?" He never replied. It wasn't spite. It was standard. My standards had changed. One morning after dropping Sophie at daycare, I walked past a local women's center with a "now hiring" sign in the window. I walked in on instinct. 2 interviews and one very long email later, I was hired part-time with potential to grow, helping women restart after divorce, after trauma, after silence. Women like me. I walked home that day, heart-racing air crisper, sky brighter. I felt the rush of standing on the edge of a new chapter, and this time I wasn't afraid to turn the page. That night, Sophie crawled into my bed, half asleep, murmuring, "You're the best mommy," and I believed her. Not because I was perfect, but because I finally believed in myself, too. 1 year later, I stood in front of a room full of women, all with their own versions of broken. Some had just left. Some were still thinking about it. Some were coming back to life slowly, piece by piece. I wasn't there to inspire. I was just there to tell the truth. I used to think being quiet made me a good wife, I said. That staying was strength. That carrying everything alone made me worthy. They leaned in not because I was eloquent, but because I was honest. But real strength, I continued, was realizing I didn't need to stay silent to be good. That being invisible isn't the price of love. And that walking away isn't failure, it's survival. It's reclamation. I saw it in their faces, the flicker of recognition, the ache of maybe the quiet seed of me too. Afterward, I picked up Sophie from school. She ran into my arms like she always did, full of questions, full of life. We stopped by our favorite bakery, bought cupcakes we didn't need, and danced to music on the sidewalk all the way home. She asked me, "Do you miss Daddy?" I thought for a moment, then said, "I miss the idea of who I thought he could be. But no, I don't miss how it felt to be unseen." She nodded like that made perfect sense. "Do you ever wish things were different?" she asked. I smiled. "They are. They're better." That night, after Sophie went to bed, I sat on the balcony of our apartment. The city hummed below, alive and distant. I thought about where I'd been a year ago, quietly suffocating, lost in someone else's shadow. Now I had light. I had air. I had enough. Not a fairy tale, not perfect, but mine. And I wouldn't trade it for anything.